bad.
Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Varandas. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be back with a great episode. We have Adam Kokesh. I'm sure some of you guys have seen him. He's done many interviews. He's had his own podcast. He's been on the Rogan podcast. He's had debates, multiple debates with many different people. He's had his own show, Adam vs. the Man. He's an Iraqi veteran turned into an anti-war activist, libertarian activist, journalist, and author of a book called Freedom, which is free online, which we get into. He's also been in many documentaries. So chances are he might not be a new figure for you, but I'm sure you've heard him or seen him in some places. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are we've probably seen some of the same documentaries and listened to the same podcasts. So chances are you have run into his work. Really interesting guy, fun guy to talk to, very passionate, which I love. And so I won't tell you too much more about him because we get into it on the show. If you guys don't know, if you're new to the show, you can find the video version of this episode and all our episodes on YouTube. You can just search Ripple Effect Podcast or our YouTube channel, which is RV Theory 6. It's also the name of my Twitter handle, RV Theory 6, at RV Theory 6, and also my Instagram handle is RV Theory 6. So easy to find me. Or you can just search Ripple Effect Podcast. You'll find it. But if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, check me out. You'll see. I mean, I kind of share different things on each platform. On Instagram, obviously, I share more pictures of my family and car shows I go to and all the summer stuff you do. And I'm new to it, so I'm still kind of getting the hang of it and trying to build a platform on there and use it to share my podcasts when they come out. Obviously, you can't share the links, so I just kind of share the artwork. So if you follow me on any of the platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you'll be able to get the updates on when the episode's out, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And like I said, you can see all the video episodes of our video episodes of our shows. So if the guest calls in using video, you'll be able to see me and, in this case, Adam, actually have the conversation. So he did call in using video, so you'll be able to see us two have the conversation. And if you, by any chance, want to put faces to the names or voices. And on our YouTube channel, all our podcast episodes, I always put links to all our guests' work and all my work, like their books, their websites, all their social media links, and also to my website, my social media sites, all that stuff, and also my music project, Theory 6, which is a great way of supporting the show. If you want to support the show, you can find links to Theory 6 music, or you can just search for it anywhere digital downloads are available, and all that money goes to supporting the show. We also started a Patreon page. You can find that link in the show notes too, in the show description on our YouTube channel, and that's another way of supporting the show. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a way where you can donate $1 or how much money you want to support my podcast, or just about any podcast, because I believe all podcasters, or at least all the ones I listen to, use Patreon as a service or option to support the show. So definitely check it out. And I think that's it for now. So hopefully you guys are enjoying your summer. Unfortunately, enjoying my summer with the kids and going to car shows and cookouts and weddings and all that stuff has kind of prevented me from getting out these shows as quickly as I would like. But got plenty of great guests that I'm just figuring out schedules with, and hopefully we'll be doing shows very soon. I got another great guest next week, so look out for a new episode next week. And I think that's it for now. So enjoy the show, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Oh, Adam, there you are.
Hey.
How are you?
Sorry, I was standing by and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to be sitting down for a while. I'm going to have to empty a bladder first.
Yeah, I was kind of like back and forth myself. And then I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I don't really have to go that bad. So I'm like, I could end up sitting in front of the toilet for a while, wondering if Adam's waiting for me. But thanks for being with me, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, no, my pleasure. Oh, let me get my phone ringer off.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been.
So,
well, I mean, there's tons of things to talk about, obviously, with the current events and you running in 2020. And honestly, a term that we've talked a lot about on the show is libertarianism. And you know, a lot of people, like even myself, always talk about how it's hard for the basic principles for people to really argue against it. Like with the idea that we all get to kind of the right to pursue happiness as long as you're not invading somebody else's right to pursue happiness. Like, who can disagree with that, you know? And but it's weird because a lot of people, when you use the word or the term libertarianism or you bring up Ron Paul, it's amazing how when you bring up something that seems kind of different than the norm, like we're so trained to believe that we only can slightly change society or change the way we think. Anything else too drastic and it's chaos. And, you know, I remember when Ron Paul was running and a lot of people like Joe Rogan and yourself, a lot of people who kind of went behind him. And, you know, I would argue for like, hey, this guy is consistent with his views and it's hard to dislike this guy. And and you would always hear, well, oh, he's too crazy. He's too over that. Oh, his opinions on foreign policy are too, you know, it would never work, or his opinions on shutting down this part of the government or that part of the government would never work. And it's almost like it's been even intentional or unintentional, but it seems like we've been brainwashed to believe that we need things that are slightly different, and anything that's too radically different, it scares people. So what it does, it keeps us in this cycle of constantly having more of the same and more of the same and more of the same.
Yeah.
And you know, no better person than yourself. Actually, I think I emailed you probably a while ago, but I think some years ago, maybe a year ago or something like that. And then, you know, every once in a while I'll try to reconnect with people again, somebody I try to get a hold of. And then, but it's good because I figured, you know, the reason I wanted to have you on even then and now, I think you're really good at sharing your perspective, your ideas, and really getting, because people, it's a term people hear a lot about, but people don't know exactly what it means or what the ideas behind it are. And I think a lot of times we connect a term to a person, and then maybe that changes our perspective on the term. You know, it's no different than communism or socialism, all these terms. I mean, a lot of times people will use them in debates and arguments, and a lot of times we really don't know what they mean.
Never define them.
Yeah, we never really define them. And I mean, even socialism, you look at during the 80s and 70s, you know, when we're invading Central and South American countries because we're fighting socialism, you know, and then, you know, you have all these people that grew up in that era where they hated communism and socialism, but you ask them to define it, and they can't really define it. But it's just this boogeyman, you know, and which is great because you're never really fighting a person, you're fighting a idea, kind of like terrorism today, you know, very similar. So, you know, as the guest, I guess I should let you talk at some point. But
well, I'm really glad you brought that idea up about gradualism as because you gave me an awesome idea. So I hope you'll ask that and we can get into that, because I mean, it brings up some really important dynamics that and what I like to share, I think about my way of thinking is how it's not just, well, here's the philosophy and, you know, here's politics, but, you know, bringing in like a bigger picture kind of analysis, looking at the long-term historical view and looking at how we achieve a free society in light of modern technology. And I think a lot of people in this space aren't really talking about that. And then what's really interesting to me is the way that you brought it up, where it becomes immediately relevant to strategy and tactics.
Yeah. Well, we can get right in it. Usually I used to do the intros back in the day, right when the guest came on, and but now I go back and do it because it keeps the conversation more casual. We're just like, fuck it. Once the call starts, we're recording. We'll just keep it going, you know. And but yeah, it's similar to, you know, some people obviously on the libertarian movement weren't fans of the Zeitgeist. You know, I've had our mutual friend. I know you've had interviews with him. James Corbett. He's been on my show a bunch of times, and so has Peter Joseph has been on your show. And it's cool that you're willing to talk to people that you don't technically agree on everything, but I think what you said, I think the really important term is the big picture. And I think that one thing we can all agree on is that we need a change. We need a drastic change. And it doesn't matter if it's your point of view on where you think the world should head or society should head, or if it's Peter Joseph's. I think people are afraid for the same reasons. It's like, that's too different. That's so, that would never happen. And it's so, but I almost feel like, because of technology and because of the internet, like, things are changing so drastically, and you can brainwash maybe generations before us, but you can't brainwash kids today. I mean, they're living in a world where it's more about community, and it's more your cell phone, and it's more about community. It's more about connections. Like, we have a family-owned little construction company, and one thing I talk to other employers, they're always talking about, like, oh, these young kids today are so lazy. They don't want to work overtime. They don't want to work at all. This and that. I'm like, because maybe they're not brainwashed like our generations were with this idea that, like, we need to buy shit to make us happy. And it's not, and the Edward Bernays propaganda nonsense of just, corporations just convince you that, like, if you have the brand new car, that's what's going to make you happy. Or you have the brand new watch, that's what's going to make you happy. And really, at the end of the day, it's about community and being a part of a tribe, and our interactions with one another, our relationships, either with our significant others or our family. And that's what really, and that's why I think, like, I have 2 kids, and you learn from them, because it doesn't matter if I raise my kids in a mansion or in a box. If I'm there for them and I give them love, they're going to grow up loving me back and show me the same type of love back. And you hear stories like that with professional athletes who lived in a car with their mother and have this amazing connection with their parents. And then you have celebrity kids who have all the nice cars and houses, everything they could possibly want, but because their parents weren't present, that they're addicted to drugs or whatnot. So I think that the younger generation is living in a world where money doesn't seem quite as important. Like I think we're close in age. I'm 32, I think, and I
35.
think So we're close in age, and it's one of those things where, like, we grew up where if we wanted the new album, like, we had to go make money to buy it. If we wanted to anything, we want to go to the movies, we had to make money to buy it. So we had this kind of this connection to money, where, like, kids today, they have more free shit than ever. Like, all their entertainment, anything they could possibly want, like, they can go online, like this podcast, or your podcast when you were doing it, your show, your YouTube channel, all this stuff is free. So it's almost like, when people talk about, or kids are lazier today, are they really lazy, or are they figuring it out and they realize that, like, money's not quite as important to them as time? Like, I always say, you can make more money, you can't make more time. And
the human relationship with materialism is fundamentally shifting at this point because of technology and productivity.
Absolutely. So, but let's start from the beginning. I'm sure there's not a lot of people who don't know your backstory, but it's always interesting to hear for people who might not be familiar. Like, how did you go from, because you're one of the few ex-Marines, I don't know, would you say ex-Marines, Marines? I don't know how to, I don't want to, what's the right way of phrasing it?
Yeah, so some Marines get offended because there's no such thing as an ex-Marine, and it's true. Like, they kind of get in your head like that. I mean, I don't take offense to it, but it's, the saying, once a Marine, always a Marine. Yeah, I enlisted in the reserves when I was still a junior in high school, and I didn't get to go to boot camp till after graduating, and then I volunteered to go to Iraq, and I was in Fallujah in 2004 with a 6-man civil affairs team during the first battle, and it was an interesting experience, to say the least, and it propelled me to enlist, I almost said enlist, in Iraq Veterans Against the War, but to join Iraq Veterans Against the War when I came home, and I was very active in the anti-war movement around that time, which sadly, we found out later was much more of an anti-Bush movement than an anti-war movement. So,
because you went from, you joined the Marines, so obviously you kind of, I don't want to say fell for the patriotic thing. Yeah. So, what happened? Like, was it what you saw there? Was it what you witnessed there? What was it that you went from, like, this patriotic, you kind of, I hate to say fell, because some people truly believe that they're fighting for the right cause.
Yeah, gullible.
Yeah. And it's not, and it's one of those things, like, you're one of the few Marines who, when people say thank you for your service, you don't give them the response that they probably expect in return. No. And it is one of those things where, in a way, it's like, I get both perspectives. Like, somebody if their intentions were true, like it's almost like I get thanking them because it's like, well, they thought they were doing the right thing. So I guess that alone is something morally good. No,
it's it's tempting to make that excuse, and it's kind of the politically correct thing to say, well, even if the institution is totally morally incorrect, we have to thank the troops for being willing to fight and die. And it's true that there is, for I think most people who enlist, that core motivation of doing something noble or selfless or the right thing. That's definitely true for me. But there were plenty of, selfish reasons, ignorant reasons. And I think it's so obvious at this point, the truth about the military making America less safe, that having a military makes us less safe. Yes, the founders of this country were right to oppose the idea of a standing army. To think that the U.S. military, as I did, is somehow a force for good in the world is such silly, dangerous, wishful thinking that if you use that as an excuse to sign up to help or directly kill for politicians, that is unforgivably ignorant, negligent in its ignorance, even to do that. To say you're going to put all of this effort into joining the military and put essentially zero effort into questioning its premise, or insufficient effort to truly question what is the purpose of the United States military. And so when people say thank you for your service, I say, what, are you a banker? Are you a politician? Are you a war profiteer? What is it? I mean, because that's who I was serving. Why are you thanking me for serving them?
Yeah, no, I get it. But what if, okay, so to use the example of like, what if an activist was a part of some group that was doing something, for a cause, and then come to find out that cause was sponsored by the Koch brothers or the Soros. Like, if their heart's in the right place and they felt like, are they still to, I guess. So someone joins the KKK because they think that it's good for their community. Are you going and then they realize that it's wrong. Are you going to go, thank you for your service in joining the KKK. Thank you for your good intention in trying to make the world a more racially pure, better place. Yes, thank you for that. That was really good. Although now I'm glad that you're educated. No, you don't know. I mean, just come on. Like, let's be honest. The premise is the same here. Yeah, I guess where it's probably coming from is like being empathetic towards somebody who possibly just didn't have access to the right information, a lack of, understanding history.
Yeah, see, you could have made that excuse before the internet.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, you're right. But unfortunately, we are a product of our environments, and kids are grown up in. I mean, let's be honest. Like, you get a liberal parent, you usually get a liberal child. You get a Republican parent, you get a Republican. It's like a lot of times you grow up kind of adopting your parents' beliefs and stuff like that. You don't, unless you have a parent who really does push the idea of debate and critical thinking. Sometimes you don't think for yourself. So,
right.
And I think that's a huge issue where people will grow up in my father was a Marine, my grandfather was a Marine, my great-grandfather was a Marine. So it's like this idea of like, you never got the opportunity of being exposed to this information that's like, hey, look at Smedley Butler. Look what he, look at
sure.
War's a racket. Look at the fact that one of the most decorated, celebrated Marines of all time said that war was a racket and wrote a book about it. And this was back in the, the 20s or whenever it was, a long time ago. And yet, so I get it. You're right. You're absolutely right. I think a little bit.
If I may on this, before you move off that point, it sounds like you're grappling with the issue of blame. You're like, well, I don't want to blame them. It's not their fault because of nurture and nature and conditioning and environment. And I totally endorse analyzing it from that perspective. And it's really important that when we're looking at responsibility, we're not making it about blame, and it's not about putting people at fault. It's not about demonizing someone. Even the worst psychopaths who are in charge of our system, what made them psychopaths? If you want to say, hey, genetic lottery, and there's some argument for some genetic interaction, I'm much more, and this is kind of a really unnecessary sidebar, but I'm much more inclined to believe that all human behaviors are controlled at some level by conditioning. What makes someone inclined to be a psychopath? It's the product of abuse and torture and neglect in early childhood that leads to that kind of disconnect from your own self, a void of self-love that projects as a void of empathy or connection to other people in the world. And so it's never about fault. It's always about looking at things objectively and saying, well, this is an independent, conscious entity. This is a real human being. And for better or for worse, this person is responsible for their actions. And if they will take that responsibility and if they will make up for the damage they've caused, we want to elevate them. We want to support them. We want to give them love and encouragement as well. And this was a really important adjustment in my activism over the course of now over a decade, going from, I'm the angry anti-war veteran. These motherfuckers, sent me to watch my buddies die in front of me in combat to make Halliburton rich. Screw that. To, where I'm at a much better place of understanding now, where I see that how we move forward is not with hate. You can't fight hate with hate, just like you can't fight darkness with darkness, as MLK would have said. Only light can do that. And it's really important when we talk about freedom, because what we're doing in politics as libertarians is not politics, it's anti-politics. Politics is how do we control, how do we dominate, who do we point the guns of government at to organize society? And our answer is nobody. Stop pointing guns at each other. Stop trying to rule people. Stop trying to control others by force altogether. And that philosophy at the core of that is voluntarism, that all human relationships should be free of force and fraud and coercion, that they should be peaceful and interactions should be by choice, that individual rights should be respected. That's based in love. We want to love ourselves. We want to create a world where love is able to come to us when we're able to project that love to other people. So when we talk about this as a political movement, it is absolutely the opposite. It is an anti-political movement and engaging in that old way of reacting with fault. I mean, even the language that we use, and I'm a huge fan of the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, because it really retrains your brain to relate to people in a way that is free of that judgment and free of your own emotional conflicts, and you're able to connect with people on a deeper level. And that's what we need to do if we really want to establish a free society, is to ensure that our culture is not tempted by fear or hate or violence, but grounded in love. And if anything, I would say that the historical record clearly proves humanity is evolving to this over time. We are increasing exponentially in our ability to take care of our own needs, each other's needs, to be connected and to meet each other with love and compassion. That's really what's moving humanity forward right now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, it's one of those, well, it's funny because one thing that you brought up in the beginning of that was, and it's a inner debate I've been having with myself, like, when does a victim become the criminal? This idea of like somebody who has had a shitty environment, like you said, most people who are abusers have been abused, and it's like, when do you stop feeling bad for them, and when do you start saying that, hey, you're responsible for your own actions? And it's a really I think it's a blurry line. It's probably an invisible line, and it's probably really hard to really decide.
No. The framework that I'm suggesting here, Ricky, is one where you kind of separate that. It's not about feeling good or bad for someone. It's about empathizing with them. Responsibility, like the idea of responsibility is really important as we talk about it in this context. Of course, again, definitions. But I would say that responsibility is kind of used in two different ways, right? There's the idea that you can take responsibility, like responsibility is a choice in terms of your attitude and how you respond to the world, and taking responsibility describes a lot of different things. But when we say you are responsible, it's just sort of like attributing the trueness of an act to an actor, like my computer right now, is responsible for this Skype conversation, right? Like, I am responsible for everything that I have done in my body in the past. The rock on the ground is responsible for sitting there and being a rock. Like, it's like, yes, if you kill someone, that's your responsibility. If you stole something, that's your responsibility. You are responsible for that action, as in you are the direct actor who caused that to occur. And in that sense, responsibility is not so much a practice as it is an observation. People are responsible for their own actions. That's just sort of like a fact of human existence. And when you embrace that, it means you don't have to, you get past the whole, victimizer, blaming mentality. You can't pass victimhood on. Like you said, I was abused, so I abused my kids. No, I'm still responsible for that. And it's not that you should feel bad for me. You should empathize, perhaps, and understand what's going on if you want to help me in that situation. For the record, I don't have kids, and I don't still beat my wife, and I'm not married. And my parents don't know that I'm gay, and I'm not gay. But no, just making a joke out of my own miswording there. But you see, my point is that you can get past this whole old mentality of relating to people that way, and it's a sort of much more Zen-centered acceptance of reality as it is, rather than trying to resist or fight it.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense, and you're right. I mean, regardless of how, if you see them as like the way I was wording it, the criminal or the victim, they're still responsible regardless. Absolutely, yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah, I guess that internal thing, it's like your initial, I guess, we're talking about a society. I mean, that's a good segue. How would you deal with people who may be victims of things like that and end up becoming, because I mean, this idea of all of us living freely, I mean, I think the majority of us are good. I think we've been told, I've had debates with people at the gym with this idea that the only reason people don't do bad, they don't kill somebody, they don't do this, they don't do that, it's because they're afraid of going to jail.
There's a law.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's bullshit. Because, because I'm like, you tell me the criminal who is choking his wife to death, I'm like, you think that he's thinking like, oh shit, I should really stop now because if she dies, I'm gonna get more time. It's like, no, they don't. They don't think that far in advance. And it's no different than with the legalizing. Like, I was born in Portugal, and Portugal legalized all drugs in 2001. And this idea that like, oh, everybody's going to do more drugs or everything's legal. It's like, no, man, I don't do heroin because I don't want to do heroin. It's not because, and I live in Massachusetts where it's pretty available. And I don't do heroin because I don't want to do it. It's not because it's illegal. And when has something that's illegal ever disappeared from the face of the earth? It's never worked. It's never, making things illegal don't make it disappear. All it does is create a black market and puts the money from one mafia to the other mafia, and so it is, we have this idea that like, we're all. And I think I was in a conversation with James Corbett who told me about an experiment in some place where they got rid of all the street signs and street lights and to see how traffic would handle it, and there was actually less accidents.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense because the idea of like, I'm putting my faith into that light to tell me when to go or not go. But if I don't have a light, I'm going to be a lot more cautious and I'm going to be paying attention because I don't know if some other a-hole is going to be flying by. So it kind of makes sense. But this idea that like we need like Big Brother, we need somebody to kind of look after us and tell us what we can or cannot do because we're not capable of doing it ourselves. And then it's a slippery slope because another person who's been on my show, who's also been on yours, Jesse Ventura, he talked about when he was the governor how he was all about trying to remove laws. He's like, there's too many fucking laws, and then, when he talked to his staff, they're like, listen, this is what the whole process is. By the time you get one law removed, it's like, you're not even going to be the governor anymore. And,
yeah.
And so it's just one of those.
Dude, you got to stop. You're
sorry.
so much material here. I can't hold back anymore.
Go ahead.
Now you brought it around to your original question. But no, I got to go back to the one at the start of that first about, what do you do with bad actors? And this is such an important question. And a lot of libertarians don't really take the time to understand this because it sounds like it's a little abstract, but it's really not. And I cover this in my book, Freedom, available for free at thefreedomline.com. Link, I'm sure, somewhere around.
Links. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the difference between justice and punishment. And when you are saying you smoke weed and I don't like that you're smoking weed, so I'm going to lock you in a cage, I'm punishing you. There's no justice here. I am causing you pain because I don't like your behavior. I'm causing you pain in order to control you. That makes me the criminal here. I'm using violence to violate your right to put what you want in your own body in order to control you. That's punishment. Now, justice, on the other hand, as a completely different concept, is making victims whole. The process of making a victim whole when they have been wronged, undoing damages, and returning stolen property. So if I stole your weed, I break into your house and I steal your pot, and then someone comes and forcibly detains me to remove the pot and give it back to you, that's justice. Although, to be pure justice, they would also have to take $1 out of my pocket to compensate them and the cost of returning that weed. Justice is about making your victims whole. So when you say, you know what, we're going to hold ourselves as a society or as a governing body, as a government, of course, government is really incapable of this, as a private service provider or a community-based organization who's tasked with providing for the public safety, dealing with actual crimes, dealing with bad actors. It's a free society is one in which people in that position say, we are going to hold ourselves to this standard of justice. We are not going to punish people. We are going to make victims whole. And we are going to, when there is an immediate threat, apply force to forcibly defend people and isolate bad actors from society. So this gets to the more complicated part of your question. What do you do with someone who really is a danger? And you're talking about, you know, someone who is now making their own victims, but it's because they were a victim in the past of some trauma or abuse. So let's take the case of rape, for example, because that is an extremely heinous crime. And we're talking not about he said, she said cases, but cases with irrefutable evidence or where someone is caught in the act and there's a witness of a rape taking place or, you know, there's a rape being attempted. It is absolutely justified in a situation like that to use force to stop that from happening. Now, to make a victim whole in a case of something so traumatic and violent as rape is really difficult. So there needs to be somewhat of a subjective market standard based on circumstances for that victimizer to make their victim whole, whether it's by financial compensation or labor compensation or something else. And what I would envision is that in a free society, if someone were caught in an attempted rape, they would be forcibly isolated in a debtor's prison. They would be forced to compensate their victim for the trauma that they have caused them by performing labor and allowing them to be the beneficiary of the product of that labor for whatever is somewhat subjective, again, based on market standards, an appropriate means of compensation to that victim that would allow people to say this person has made their victim whole. More importantly, we're not talking about someone who screwed up their calculations in a crime of incentive where they stole and they thought they could get away with it and they didn't get away with it. We're talking about someone who attempted to rape somebody. That's a severe liability for society that needs to be handled. And the way government does it is so dangerously wrong, because what government does by punishing people, they say, oh, well, you try to rape someone, so we're going to punish you. We're going to take you off the streets for 6 months or a year, whatever it is. A lot of times people get off with less. Sometimes in government situations they get off with nothing. But even if it's 10 years for an attempted rape in a government system, it doesn't matter. Because what matters is two things. One, making the victim whole. Two, proving to society that you are no longer a threat. And in the case of a potential rapist, that person really needs to go through the therapy and the mental conditioning and whatever rehabilitation they need to do to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they are no longer such a liability to society. When you get government out of the way, only then can you have a system of real justice that takes care of victims and victimizers, rehabilitates society, and makes it possible for these people to be returned in a way that is productive, where they are no longer a liability to everyone else. This is obviously so much more in the interest of public safety. When we have a system based on justice instead of punishment, you'll be so much more secure in your possessions, because crimes of passion even will be so disincentivized that they're going to be almost impossibly rare. But a society that embraces these values is going to be so much more compassionate and loving and supportive of people dealing with mental illness and other problems that would make them a hazard to society, that you're going to see people getting the help long before they become such a threat. And crimes that we're talking about are pretty much going to be wiped out, if not led to an infinitesimal, tiny remnant of what they are now. When we talk about violence as a whole, first of all, let's just put it in these terms. If you care about violence and you care about a free society being a nonviolent society and you want to look at the problem objectively, you got to go right away. 90+% of the violence committed in the world today is done in the name of government. And of the remaining 10%, about 90% of that we can show is directly caused by government policy, and the war on drugs especially. You add in the war on poverty and all the other things that encourage homelessness and destitution in inner cities. You could probably make the case that 99.9% of violence committed in the world today is either directly or indirectly caused by government. So right away, you get rid of government, 99+% of the violence in the world is gone. Then we get to talk about dealing with the true mental health cases who are a liability to society. Then we get to come up with systems that disincentivize theft entirely. We get to create a real system of accountability and justice. That's what we have to look forward to when we get government out of the way.
But isn't it some of these ways of handling things? So, for example, you know, you agree that if somebody rapes, it should be handled this way. But that would mean that everybody would be on the same page on how to handle the same crime, right? So, for example, if somebody... No,
not necessarily.
So
no, because
if we differ in opinion, how would one person would be treated differently in this circumstance and that circumstance? So in other words, if somebody raped somebody in this town, and if somebody raped somebody in the town over, if the people over there say no, death, we're you know, we think that rape should be death. People, you know, that maybe.
Okay, well, sure. First, about the death penalty. The death penalty is really only justified when society is incapable of forcibly isolating someone with reasonable security. And at the point at which we are capable of doing that, the death penalty became obsolete. But if you think about it, you are, in a sense, issuing a death penalty if someone is attacking you and you kill them in self-defense in a way that's entirely justified. So yes, you are applying already subjective circumstantial values and evaluations to that situation to determine what happens in it. So yeah, and if you and me are on a desert island and a third guy shows up and starts beating us up and he's deranged, yeah, we're probably just going to kill him, you know?
Yeah.
If we're in a city and it's outside of a bar and the guy's just drunk, we're not going to kill him. We're going to tackle him, subdue him, and you know, hand him over to some legitimate service provider that could handle that appropriately, right? Similarly, if someone is raped in a village in an extremely poor community, the compensation is going to be proportionate to the economic capabilities of that community and what's appropriate to compensate that person for the damages based on where they live and what the cost of living is there. If you live in somewhere that's a very expensive city and you rape someone there, the cost of that, of making them whole, is going to be a lot different there. So there are underlying principles based on the natural law, based on libertarian philosophy, the idea that you as a human being own yourself, and everything in justice flows from that. But how it's actually carried out really is a matter of market consensus. So let me suggest another model to you here for a bad actor, like a business who, say, screwed a customer over at the counter and said, you know, well, no, you paid us an extra $100, but, you know, we're just going to count that because you put it on the counter. Well, if the guy's got a record of it, takes a picture, puts it on Yelp, you know, that company's going to lose a lot of business. But if the company says, oh, you know what, our bad, that was totally a mistake, doesn't represent our values, we are firing the guy who was working at the counter that day, and we're going to give this customer $200 to say we're sorry, then most people are going to go, okay, they handled it. But if the business goes, nah, screw you, we're going to just keep this $100 and stand by our clerk, then the market says, yeah, we don't want to play with them anymore. So similarly, in justice, when it's handled by community organizations, when it's handled by insurance companies, when it's handled by private defense, and I can only point to all of these amazing possibilities that are open to us when we get government out of the way. I'm not a central planner. I'm not here to tell you it's going to be this way, it's going to be this way. All I know is without violence of the state, it's going to be a lot better. So similar to standards in industry, you know, like why is it that, you know, my USB plug, you know, is this same standard little thing on all of my devices? Is there a law? Is there someone saying, you know, is there saying that, you know, if you make a mouse, it has to have, you know, the 4-wire USB card? No, people just do that because that's what the market demands. That's what people want. And when people want something different, changes right away. And when people want something different in a different location, they're able to be served according to their needs right there.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I completely agree with you. I think, you know, I've made the argument with numerous of people is that, you know, in small, I think smaller sample sizes, the market does regulate itself in regards to if I go to a coffee shop, like you said, if they treat me like shit, or, you know, and then I'm not going to go back there if there's one across the street that has better coffee or lower prices, and that forces the other guys to step up their game and whatnot. But then when you start getting bigger companies, when you start getting huge Walmart-like companies or Halliburtons or whatever that can really change or have huge influence. And in regards to, okay, imagine a world without government. So you could still have something like, I'm sure you're familiar with, like the light bulb conspiracy and the cartel that, you never heard of this? So
I don't think so.
So basically what happened was that all the initial light bulb companies, they were making them last too long. And then what they did is they all got together and they decided that we're going to have a standard on how long they can last. And little by little, every year, they kept lowering how long they could last until they got to that standard. And everybody basically was in cahoots for the reason of obviously maximum profit. And I think that, you know, and this is where, like, the libertarian idea, it seems like it conflicts a little bit, because in some aspect, like, it is about love and it's about people pursuing happiness and doing what they enjoy. And you know what? We don't get a reset button. We don't get to, you know, I always talk about that movie In Time, because even not that it was a great movie, but the concept was interesting, how you could actually see the minutes of your life ticking backwards on your wrist. And I always talk about how if you could see that, how different you would live your life and how much more important it would be for you to be happy and for other, you know, for other people's right to pursue happiness. And so it's one of those things where, so we understand that happiness is important and all those things, but then it gets to a point where we're just like, well, it's about the market and it's about, you know, this. And when you have corporations, or you have, you know, they really don't care about people's happiness. They care about maximum profit. If that means getting in the way of people's happiness, it's okay. If I can pollute, for example, you know, we have a yard where we have our construction equipment. If I could throw a bunch of shit in the back instead of disposing it properly, and, you know, nobody drives by, nobody, you know, it's my property, there's some wetlands there, people probably wouldn't know for another fucking 200 years. I could do that, and you know, who would, it would save me money from disposing it properly, or traveling somewhere and getting rid of it. Or, you know, if I hit asbestos pipe or whatever, I could just throw it in the back or whatever and throw it in some wetlands, and who cares about what it might cause with future issues. Like, what would stop me from doing something like that?
Well, that's only true when it's government land and there's no one there to value it and protect it properly. But what if I may, I got to go back. I got to go back to, like, two really big things here. I think it's possible that you're engaging in a bit of a sort of fallacy of the unseen here when you say that it's corporations that are responsible for the light bulb conspiracy, when it's really the fact that government prevents competition from coming up and challenging the existing corporate oligopolies or quasi-monopolies that makes that possible. So, like oil and gas companies, if you wanted an oil and gas company that was ethical, you can't just go like, I'm going to start my own company, who's with me, let's have a Kickstarter, you know, let's launch our own corporation, because you're not going to compete with the existing powers that are using government to keep you from competing with them. So it's an unseen cost of government regulation that you have to connect when you say, well, there's not enough competition, and competition is really important when it comes to meeting people's needs. That really is the actual you know, animating force of the market when it's a free market, when violence isn't an option. Basically, those light bulb companies said, oh, we have violence as an option to prevent competition, so we can get away.
But like, I agree with you. So if one company did everything ethical, they progressed as a company, they grew as a company completely based on being an ethical, good company. But now they're huge. So now they have huge influence, and they're a big percentage of the market of light bulbs. And they can gather everybody else and say, hey, either we all do this, you know, and that's basically what happened. We all said that, hey, we all profit, you know, and we're all on the same page. What does government have to do with that? So okay, in that case, it's possible that what you're describing could have happened
from secrecy. But I don't think people didn't notice that light bulb lifespans weren't going down. And at some point there would have been a market demand and some entrepreneur going, hey, I'm going to make a light bulb that lasts longer, and government steps in and makes that difficult for him. Not impossible necessarily, but more difficult. And now we've gotten to the point, I mean, I'm looking at halogen bulbs that I know last way longer than any traditional fluorescent bulbs. So eventually that was overcome by the market, despite government impending that advancement, and despite government making that kind of conspiracy possible. But I want to go somewhat more fundamental here with what is the definition of capitalism and the free market, because when we say capitalism, the words are pretty clear: an economic system based on ownership of the means of production. The problem with how we talk about this is that that's been perverted to mean factories and tools and things that make dollars and widgets. But the ultimate means of production is the individual human mind. Ownership of yourself. If you don't own yourself, now that's the foundation of capitalism. If your self-ownership is not respected, it means that someone is forcing you into relationships against your will. That means you are not allowed in that world to engage freely in exchanges with other human beings by your choice in pursuit of your own happiness. And this is the other important thing to remember here when we talk about capitalism. Ownership of the means of production implies that something is being produced and that production can then be measured or quantified. But that's only partially true, because the means of production being the individual human being, the ultimate metric of productivity cannot be dollars or widgets or factories or anything that can be counted on a bottom line, but rather human happiness. And when you understand that that is what we're engaging for, that when we engage in relationships with other people, we are seeking happiness for ourselves. We're seeking a positive outcome that can't be measured. There's so many more important, valuable things in life than that. Then that is what allows us to see capitalism as what it truly is, where, yes, dollars are important and widgets and factories and all of these principles apply to all of those things. But at the top of that value pyramid is individual human beings and human happiness. So I'm sorry, now I've forgotten where that last question was that you were on that.
I think I was I asked the question if I was dumping stuff in the back. Was that the last question? And then how,
that's it. You were getting on to the question.
Even, I know you did briefly say that if it was state owned or whatnot, but what if it was my property and and then one day I decided to sell it, never told the next owner that, hey, I mean, next to our property, Monsanto had some property not too far, and that stuff is so polluted, and they're constantly testing the soil. I was just talking to somebody from conservation not too long ago, because they we're having some issues with our property with just this exact reason. They were just checking our property, making sure we weren't dumping things back there. And then they're sharing a story about how Monsanto, they've been gone for a while, but when they were there, nothing will grow there, and there's all these issues with chemicals in the ground that they didn't tell anybody about. And it's just, and again, I'm not, a lot of the questions I ask, it's not because I'm trying to purposely be the devil's advocate. One thing I do love about you is the fact that you're more than willing to share your perspectives and engage in debate.
Thanks.
And I mean, anybody watch you on YouTube, I mean, you'll go up to anybody and have these discussions. And this is why the show is called The Ripple Effect, because I believe that the simple act of sparking a conversation can cause a ripple. And I think that the most dangerous idea is thinking that we can't make a difference. We can't change anything. What am I going to do? I'm a Portuguese immigrant who lives in, Ludlow, Massachusetts, who 3 years ago thought about starting a podcast, because I was a big fan of Joe.
Are you a U.S. citizen, by the way?
No, I'm not.
Okay, but you live in New Hampshire.
No, in Massachusetts.
Sorry, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
You're gonna. You were in New Hampshire. I'm sorry, I mixed those up. But if you're, here's the greatest thing about the Libertarian Party in the United States.
Yeah.
Is you don't actually need to be a U.S. citizen to participate as a delegate, and you can help me win the nomination for president in 2020 and bring this message to a bigger stage. But if I may, we'll go back to that.
Yeah.
Assuming we have time. I really do want to answer your pollution question, because that is a huge one. And I have to start, again, by putting it in a bigger context here, because a lot of liberals who are very focused on material equality get caught up in that when we talk about government. And, well, who's going to provide, well, what if I'm sorry. For me, this is a little bit personal because it was when I was in the anti-war movement and found out that it was an anti-Bush movement. The bargain that most of the left made with Barack Obama was, oh, you're going to give us free health care? Then you can keep bombing brown people in the Middle East. That's cool. We'll shut up about that. We'll let you do drone strikes and bombs, and we'll stop marching and protesting. We'll leave the libertarians out on their own with that. That's freaking sick when you boil it down like that and you point out what that bargain really was for every leftist who thought that they were anti-war, who ended up getting behind Obama, who could have looked, just looked at the fine print on his website and known that he was going to keep the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan going longer than Bush was. But anyway, so this is a kind of focus on materialism that, again, divides us and makes it harder to move forward. My answer is ultimately, stop being so darn materialistic. When you say we want accountability for polluters, I am 100% with you, but there are kids dying from drone strikes in the Middle East on a regular basis. I kind of want to address that first. More importantly, because yes, the environment is a huge concern, we do have to look at how these policies affect that. And the worst thing is how government prevents accountability for polluters and is, with the U.S. military, the single largest polluter in the entire world. So right away, hey, you want to do something about pollution? Getting rid of government is great. Now, to get down to where you're actually asking the question about how do you provide accountability for damages in a free market, it's not going to be perfect, but I guarantee without a government in the way saying that public lands don't have any interest in ownership, where people are allowed to get away with polluting, where we have a court system where you do pollute someone's land through groundwater or through pollution leaking onto someone else's property, it is a nightmare of trying to get that kind of accountability, and the big corporations who can hire more lawyers always have an advantage over justice being done. So that's huge. Yes, absolutely. You care about the environment. We have to get government out of the way. We have to stop the system of corporate privilege, and we have to have real tort reform, which only comes from a free market-based system of justice where private property is respected. Because that's what we're talking about. You damage someone's property, you need to be held accountable for it, whether it's yours or a large piece of property that's being accessed by a more public group of people. That accountability needs to be there. And right now we don't have enough of it, and government is the reason.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I definitely don't think government's the answer. I had Hunter Moss on. He's and me and him have gotten close. You know who Hunter Moss is from the Brian Callen show? Now it's called Mixed Mental Arts.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So.
And he's the big anti-Sam Harris guy. And actually, I mean, you guys should get together. I've just recently I was talking to him because he's going to be in Massachusetts, I believe, in July. And I was talking about how, because he's had Tom Woods on his show, and he was recently on the School Sucks Project. And with Brett, who's also been on this show. Yeah, I love Brett's awesome guy. Yeah, and Richard Grove. I mean, I was just on Richard Grove's show not too long ago, the Deep End, and he lives in Connecticut, so it's cool and that we get actually to physically meet some people that you meet from podcasting. But Hunter, much like yourself, is another really just willing to he understands the importance of these conversations and having not purposely disagree with people, not debate for the sake of debating, but to sharing ideas, and I remember I'm like, hey, I'm actually having Adam, because he's had Tom Woods and he had Peter Schiff on his show, and I don't think either one of them really did a great job defending their, Peter Schiff didn't really do a great job defending his perspectives that well, but I think both of you are so good at sharing ideas and not ever getting hostile. Neither of you take your positions too seriously, which I love. Some people really get defensive.
Oh, I take my position extremely
you know what I mean? But you're willing to smile while having a debate. You're willing to like,
of course.
You don't dislike somebody because they might not see your perspective or see your point of view, or if you're having a struggle to get through to them, or in some cases if they're being stubborn or ignorant, like you don't. I never. Well, at least it doesn't come through all the time. You're frustrated. It seems like you understand that. Like sometimes it's just like, hey, you're not going to get through to everybody. I'm going to do my best, and you're willing to. And you. I mean, just like anytime you're trying to talk to anybody who's brainwashed and for lack of a better term, woke, and anytime you talk to somebody who really isn't aware of how things are I guess how a lot of the game's rigged against us, then it gets to a point where it can get frustrating because the first thing they do is fight back and resist and deny, and it's like that quote, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked, and it's
yeah.
and I think that's the issue. You talk to somebody, anytime you try to change the worldview in one conversation, it can be very hard. But I think the important thing is having these conversations, because you plant the seed. You plant the seed of, I'm sure you've had conversations with people where you feel like you haven't got through to them, and maybe a month later, a week later, you're like, you know what, Adam, that thing you said, I'm like that, I was thinking about that, or you really made sense. Because I think, sometimes we get defensive in the heat of the conversation. We are emotional creatures. That's, our ideas and our emotions go hand in hand. And I think that, and that's one thing Hunter's always talking about, and it's so true. We like to believe that, we can just think logically all the time and be reasonable, and our emotions and our upbringing and all these other external influences don't have any influence on we just look at the facts and then we decide what makes the most sense. And I don't think it's that simple. And so I think initially, when you have a conversation with somebody, it can be, you can get very defensive. But I would love to have you both on at one point, and just not for a debate so much as a discussion. And it's something I've been thinking about for a while, because I'm one of those weird in-betweener guys where, I have people like Kevin Brett Venat on, and Richard Grove and James Corbett, but then I have other people like Hunter Moss and other people who have different philosophies, because I think it's important to share all these ideas. And I think when people's heart are in the right place, and I always tell my listeners, I'm like, my opinions are constantly changing, because I'm so unsure of where I stand on every issue right now, because I'm constantly getting more information and reanalyzing, and that's what we should be doing. And so how can I say I'm not going to have one person on because I think they're wrong, and then in like a week from now I'll be like, you know what, he was right, I should have had him on, So I think it's important to have these discussions and give, one of my biggest issues with government is that I feel like the media and everything, and with all the conversation about the media and mainstream media, like I feel like a lot of people that we think are dumb citizens who voted for Obama, even though he did the same shit, like how much of it's just a lack of information, lack of knowledge. And I think it's hard to have a really well thought out opinion and have an established a good opinion if you don't have the information. You can only have a opinion based on the information you have. If there's a lack of good information, then there's going to be a lack of good opinions. And so I'm sure in that rant there was a question or something you might want to.
Well, no, hold on. I think I've missed so many points. Great points you brought up already. I want to respond to, but about the debate first, or how you want to have a conversation, call it a debate. You'll get more views that way.
Well, that's true. And I've thought about that, but I'm like, you're right. People will just Google debates. Oh, have you seen this? Remember when Crowder was on Rogan, that marijuana debate? They had blew up, and people were asking me, hey, did you see that? I'm like, yeah, but I'm not a big Crowder fan. I think he's an idiot. But which people probably know from your video, your interaction with him.
Anyway, so I'm down. I'll debate anybody, anywhere, anytime for you, Ricky. You set it up.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm here. We'll make it happen. But if I may, I want to go back to the question you started this conversation with. I don't know if it was a question back then, but the point about looking towards fundamental change at this point and how we agree. I think anybody who's looking at the world honestly will agree that there's something fundamentally wrong, not superficially wrong, right, with the way that society is run by governments today, or attempted to be run, or ruled rather by people in governments. And this word radical means striking at the root of an issue. It is the opposite of fringe. Fringe being, off at the edges, nibbling around the edge. The GOP and the Democratic Party, their solutions are fringe. We want radical change that looks at the heart of the issue. And so in my book, what I figured out is the best way to move society towards freedom is by localization, taking governments apart from the top down. And the reason it's so important, Ricky, to look at it the way that you suggested rather than fighting inch by inch is that if you fight inch by inch, they're going to take a mile behind your back and laugh at you and pat you on the head. Good little citizen, you used the democratic process and you fought back, and it's not going to slow things down at all. And like you said, that it's people who have been made afraid of this radical change, and that fear is exactly what is preventing it. Because if government, say, grows 10% a year, and they don't let you see that, but they say, what, if we shrink government more than 5% a year, it's going to be a disaster. And the American people go, oh yeah, we better shrink government 5% a year. And they don't see that in all these other ways it's growing 10%. The people sitting back are just going, oh, we got them. And it's worse than being denied that change, like you said, being tricked, rather than, because now it's really hard to show people that they've been tricked, to show them, hey, there's a whole different way of looking at this. If you peek behind the curtain, you can see how things are really run. And there's nothing that we are achieving right now with the United States federal government that can't be done better and more ethically, more in line with the needs of constituents and communities at the state level or at the more local level. So I'm running for president in 2020 right now. Excuse me, I'm running for not president, to be specific. I'm going to go in and sign a single executive order, essentially declaring bankruptcy for the federal government, which I resigned from being president of the United States to being custodian of the federal government, and appoint with this order heads of each department who would be not secretaries of but custodians of, for the purpose of carrying out a relatively preordained plan laid out very specifically in this comprehensive legal document that would be that executive order I would sign immediately upon taking office. So in doing this, right now we're getting ready, we're organizing. I'm doing another tour this fall. I'm really excited about it. The Taxation is Theft Tour. You can see the schedule at thefreedomline.com/calendar. If you want to get involved, we have forums on our website there where you can sign up under your state. Right now we're recruiting delegates. As much as and I will say, I love Gary Johnson. Personally, I think he's a great dude. I think he's a man of integrity. I think he genuinely cares about the cause of freedom. But let's be honest, he's not a libertarian the way most of us would define it, as someone who understands freedom not as a set of policy positions, but as a set of principles and ethics. And that's what we need as someone representing the party in 2020 who's going to lead this with a message that reaches the people who don't vote, because they know that the system is rigged against them. When they come out in enough numbers and say we withdraw our consent, we are ready to say we're going to stop doing this federal government thing anymore. We're going to end the fighting. We're going to end the fraud. We're going to end the Fed. We're going to finally free America. That's when we get to move forward. That's why this campaign is so exciting to so many people who are getting involved right now so far in advance.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so so you're going to run to basically similar to what was it, the Harvard professor who wanted to run but wanted to be president for a day, and you remember do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah, well, I should probably remember things before I bring them up. And but yeah, so that's interesting. So for somebody like myself who's a tad confused, so you'll run, and then if you win, and or when you win, because that's what they all say. They're like, when I win and I become president.
Hey, hold on. If you haven't noticed, I am already not president, which means that I have already won.
That's true.
But we are. I will say this about winning in this. The objective for 2020 is to get the nomination and bring the Libertarian Party into the mainstream with a message that speaks to the mainstream. And I do not think it is possible. I don't think it is likely for us to win in 2020, because this is going to require a significant paradigm shift. I think this cycle leading up to 2020 is when we introduce this idea to the American people, and 24 or 28 is when we or someone running on a similar platform gets to win on this. But I, for one, am committed to running until someone else better comes along on this platform, or the federal government ceases to exist one way or another. And I think it's just as likely as someone winning with this platform that we would see a widespread secession movement result from this kind of awakening, or that we would see a financial collapse of the federal government from people being inspired by this message to opt out of the dollar system, to use cryptocurrency and barter and other things that take us away from dependence on the U.S. banking system that is, of course, the U.S. government-sponsored banking system.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think Ron Paul, well, I think most of the time, if you're unfamiliar from, if the standard public doesn't really know who you are. The first time you run is really just to get the ideas out there and get the face out there. And then, like you said, then the second time you run, you can really make some noise. I mean, like you see most people, the first time they run for president, they usually don't succeed, and then they succeed afterwards. Ron Paul, I think he was a little too ahead of his time, where I think when he ran, people weren't ready for that shift. And I feel like if he was running, obviously in this last election, I think he had a very good chance, because I think people were much more open to change and seeing something different. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Trump won, was because it wasn't the fact that people liked Trump, but it was the fact that they just wanted something different. Even if that difference sucked, they're just like, you know what, we're tired of the same cookie cutter politician who looks the same, answers questions the same, but we just want something different. And that's why, you know, it's a shame that Ron Paul is at the age that he is, and probably, you know, wants to spend some of his life enjoying it and not just, you know, trying to and it sucks that his son isn't isn't really following in his footsteps with staying consistent with his views. What's your opinion on Rand? I mean, do you have a liking towards him or not?
Well, he fell far from the tree and then rolled down the hill, and it's really unfortunate that he didn't embrace the same philosophical grounding as his father. But I do support Rand Paul in the sense that I think he should be there. I value his voice as a libertarian-leaning conservative. I think he's a guy who's shaking things up, and I'm really glad that he's there.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think during the debates and stuff, the little time that he did get to talk, he was the only one who seemed to say anything that made sense. And, you know, when it came down to foreign policy and other really important issues, I think that, you know, it was important to at least have one voice who wasn't pro-war and pro-intervention and more of the same nonsense, which creates more terrorists. And, you know, I understand. You even understand Arabic, right? Or you speak Arabic?
But I'm working on a European tour for next year. I also speak a little bit of Spanish, French, and German, and we're getting the book translated into a bunch of languages. We've already got Chinese, Korean, Turkish, and there's one other one I'm blanking. On my website under translations, there's all these translations, and there's a lot more coming. So when I do the tour in Europe next year, I'm going to be giving speeches in all of those foreign languages. I'm really looking forward to it. I gave speeches in German when I was there for an anti-war tour with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and it was really a lot of fun. It's funny because I hate learning languages, and somehow by accident I ended up speaking 5, and now
that's awesome.
You know, really getting to apply it is a lot of fun when it's about connecting with people. Like my Spanish of all my foreign languages is the best, and when I was in Acapulco last time, I got to actually convert. I mean, really share the message with a taxi driver fully in Spanish by talking about the cartels, like los carteles. Como un otro gobierno, see, it's like another government, right? And it's the same problem of violent control. And I was just barely able to convey the core ideas enough to be like, you can go read my book when it comes out in Spanish. I've already got the translation done. I'm just waiting to get it printed and type or edited and typeset here. We're also looking to go to Cuba in December, since the Libertarian Party got rolled up in Cuba recently. Since revolutions in Cuba go east to west, we're thinking we might start in Santiago, on the eastern side of the country, where the revolutions usually kick off, with enough books for everybody in that city of 500,000 people, and see what the effect is. But yeah, we're doing that in December if we can pull that together. Then China, like I said, I've already got the book translated into Mandarin, both forms. We're looking to go to China in February. Then we're going to be focusing on the state conventions. I'm releasing my war memoir book next spring, and then the European tour next fall. So we got this all mapped out through 2020. We're going to be on the road a lot. We're going to be spreading the message. We're going to be recruiting delegates right now. Like I said, that's the most important thing. You want to help me, dissolve the entire United States federal government? It is actually a relatively embarrassingly easy process to get the LP nomination, which is the first critical step. And I want to blow up the LP. I want to make it a force. The LP is the only party in American politics whose job is to put itself out of business. That's my job as a politician, and I think really that's the most important cause for humanity right now, embracing freedom and moving past these systems of centralized violent control. We are living in such an exciting time where we see this human experience accelerating exponentially, and all these squabbles of the past are just going to fall away. We get to be a part of this, so I love it. I can't imagine anything I'd rather be doing with my life right now. There's not a job. I mean, I can't imagine a job I'd rather have than getting to be a part of this really historic effort.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's awesome, because one type of email I get a lot is from people talking about how I was just an average Joe, and now I've had people like yourself who are very popular, huge following, and be able to contact them, and I always tell people, I'm like, listen, don't get stuck in the cycle. I'm like, if there's something you believe in, if there's something you love, something you enjoy, do it. And that's the message that I think I put out the most, because I think it's so important. And when I talk to people like yourself, it's like, it's this idea of like, you think like, oh, Adam must be this, this person who just, he must feel like he's above everybody. And then I've kind of, at first I remember talking to Dan Carlin and people having like social anxiety before I talked to him. I'm like, I'm a fucking idiot. How am I going to be able to hold a conversation with a historian like Dan Carlin for an hour? But then you realize like, we're all just people, and some of us pursued things like yourself and could make a career out of it and make a life out of it. And I think it's a positive story for many people listening who think like, oh, that couldn't be me. I couldn't do that. I couldn't. And I always tell people, I'm like, listen, just Joe Rogan, yourself. I mean, whoever. I mean, even Alex Jones, as crazy as he started off doing, just local TV, and now he has a huge empire, I guess. And so it's one of those things where, we're all just average people. And then, if you pursue things and you're passionate about it, and I think that really the difference between somebody who, I always say, like, people think that money motivates people, but I think a lot of times it's our work that motivates us. When you look at Nikola Tesla, when you look at the greatest songs ever written, when you look at, the greatest...
Passion motivates people.
Yeah. And I think, that's what motivates you. That's what motivates me to do this. I mean, this is an awful investment. I mean, I've only lost money doing a podcast, but so it's just, it's one of those things where, the best songs were written because they felt something and they were passionate about something. That it wasn't those 80s hair bands that were just trying to get laid and make money. Those bands came and gone. The best paintings, the best inventors. These were all motivated by their work. So I always tell people, like, if your passion's there, then you have the first ingredient to success.
Well, I got to tell you, when I got my TV show a few years ago, I had a TV show briefly. They taught me how to put my pants on both legs at the same time. So technically, I'm better than everybody else. No, I'm just kidding. I love that you made that point, and it's so true. I credit my success to luck, circumstance, perseverance, just being the right guy in the right place at the right time. I feel like I fell over backwards into full-time activism in the first place. I joined the Marine Corps. I wasn't planning on being an anti-war activist. When I was an anti-war activist, I wasn't planning on running for office, but I was supporting Ron Paul, and he endorsed me. And then I wasn't planning on getting into media, but I couldn't shut up when the race was over, so I got a TV show. And then for some reason that got picked up as a TV show, and when that got canceled, I said, well, I still can't shut up, so I'm going to keep talking on the internet. And 60 million views later, and everything else, I'm still just a guy trying to make the world a better place. And I'm like I said, I'm so grateful for everybody who's made my work possible, and for being alive at this point in human history. It's amazing. But if I can just say, thanks to everybody who made that possible. And it's not always about being the guy out front, or being the guy with who gets to talk. Oftentimes the people who I could line up everybody who's ever worked for me and say they need more of the credit than I do, hands down. Sometimes the people who make those critical differences you never even read about in the history books, the ones that made those connections, or just helped with that one critical donation at the right time. I mean, I've had my butt saved in some hairy spots by people who came through, with $200 or $300 when I needed to get out of some kind of legal situation or some logistical challenge. And if it wasn't for all the people like that, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I absolutely love about what you do is that, I mean, I can't even count how many times I've seen you get arrested online, but it's one of those
Me
things.
neither.
But I think it's important for people to see, because I think we all go along our we go to work, we do our everyday chores and responsibilities, and you don't realize that there is this thing called government that you can be a victim to it, and there's victims every day to it. And if anybody's ever been pulled over, like the fact that one wrong move, you say the wrong thing, you get the wrong police officer on the wrong day, you know, his wife just gave him divorce papers, who knows? And all this stuff, and all of a sudden you're a victim, and all of a sudden, you know, it's your word against somebody else's word, and you're stuck in this system that's rigged against you. I mean, the reason why minorities get locked up more than, you know, than other people, because they have money, because the systems, the legal system isn't designed to pursue justice. It's designed to keep, you know, control. Absolutely. And, you know, I always talk about how House of Cards and Game of Thrones is the same story, just different times. You know, it's the same thing. There's all these people fighting for power, and there's all these people doing backdoor deals, but it's isn't it? I mean, it's the same story, right?
You're totally right. But the reason I'm laughing is I only got into Game of Thrones like relatively recently.
Oh, I did too.
No, but before I did, someone started telling me about the Red Wedding. Like, they said it's based on historical events. And I thought they meant the whole show. So, like, I thought that the whole Game of Thrones thing was an historical, like, documentary-style production. And so when I watched the very first episode, and I'm like, White Walkers? Was that 1693? I don't remember reading about that in high school. But you know, yeah, the dynamics, the fundamental dynamics of control and power. Yeah, I mean, in both of those shows, yeah, some good parallels.
And were you in Psychology of Control, State of Mind? I know you were in a bunch of documentaries. I know you were in the ShadowRing, right? You were in.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, Own and Operated. I had a Relic, the guy who did that film. He was on here, but yeah, I mean these documentaries like Psychology of Control. Richard Grove was in it. A bunch of people were in it. It showed the historical nature of it, how it's not just a modern issue, but you know, with religion and Zeitgeist, I guess, is very similar too, with where it shows you how they control you with religion, then they control you with debt, you know, and I mean debt is the reason why there's so many unhappy people. You end up giving kids at 15 or 16 or 17 a credit card that they, you know, are responsible for, and they don't have any liquid funds, and they're charging it. Now they're stuck with this debt, and they go to college, they come out, they get a loan that they probably can't afford, and now they're wasting their whole lives trying to pay off that loan, which means they have no financial freedom to get another job if they're unhappy, because now they have these bills coming in every day, and you just get stuck in the system so early, and then they have you by the balls, and then you can't do the things like you said. Where I think in a different world, if we change the way we look at things and we change the way our world, because we have this belief that like the way this world has been molded, the way it's been designed is the only way that will work. It's like this because this is the best option. And, you know, having children, like my son, I could convince him that, you know, hey, you can use pens to pay for things. You don't need money, you know, and he'll do it. Like, he's just a clean slate. And if we start doing that, like teaching younger people and getting this, and which is what you're doing, because, you know, getting this message across that there can be a different way of having a society, having a culture, and the way things are now doesn't have to be the way they are. And that's why, just like in the beginning of the podcast, I talked about the similarities with the Zeitgeist movement, and I think the positive things that Peter Joseph does is the fact that he does make people rethink the way, you know, the Venus Project, same thing. You might not like their outcome or the way they or might not think it's possible to have a society, you know, the end game, you know, for a lack of a better term, but the idea that, hey, we need to just rethink things, I think that
you gotta love that they're thinking that so far out.
That big picture thing is really important. You do the same thing where you talk about the big picture, and you talk about, you know, and I think that's really important, because I think it's very easy to be born into the system and just be a part of it and never question it. And I think that, you know, what you do is you force people to question it, and you put up very good arguments about, like, you know, a world with possibly without government, with, you know, with people having different incentives and not having this mafia running things, and I think it's really important. That's why, you know, I always say, like, the mafia and the government's no different. And you know, when people talk about, like, I remember when we were having a conversation with somebody about the Clinton body count, and they're like, no, that's all bullshit. I'm like, maybe, but I'm like, guess what, man? I'm like, the mob has killed people for much less, you know, power, and much, you know, for maybe controlling a corner or a street or a bar or whatever. I'm like, and you're talking about the most powerful mafia on earth. I mean, to the deals they can make, and the all the power that they get, and resources. I'm like, that's just uncomparable to anything else. You don't think somebody's life would be worth taking out for that power? Of course it would. So it's but again, back on a positive note, what you're doing is awesome, and I can't thank you enough for putting your ass on the line with getting arrested and showing how scary it is once you do become a victim of this mob, and you get it's like the rest of us, we try to stay out of their sight, but it's very what's that book, 3 felonies a day,
I love citing that 3 felonies a day by the Columbia law professor.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because we think that, we can just, if you don't do anything wrong, then you're fine, but it's, no, man, we're breaking crimes all the time, unknowingly. So, and it's just a matter of being at the wrong place. You're talking about your success being at the right place. Well, you can be at the wrong place at the wrong time, too. And, you can go from being successful to being arrested and stuck in a system that is just going to beat you down and take money and take resources from you until you have nothing left. So it's scary. But thanks again. I know we're a little over time, and I'm ranting on like an idiot.
So, no, it's okay, and I love it. If I may just get into one little point.
Go ahead.
Here in closing, you said the possibility of a free society, and I am a big fan of referencing the work of Professor Steven Pinker of Harvard, who gave a great TED Talk called The Surprising Decline in Violence, that shows historically over time violence is on an exponential decay kind of curve, going down because humans are more capable of meeting our needs and each other's needs, communicating, getting along, and the temptations to violence are going away. The ability to confuse people about foreigners or others or outsiders. I mean, in the age of the internet, the idea of convincing millions of gullible young men to dress up in silly costumes and meet in the middle of a field where none of them live to kill each other because they're wearing different colors is inconceivable. And yes, I know what that word means. It is inconceivable in this world as connected as we are that they can get away with things like that. This is human progress. We are becoming more connected, more understanding, more informed, more loving, more peaceful, and thus more free in a way that, unless, yes, there are a couple of caveats, an asteroid comes and blows up the planet, or makes us all, dinosaur level extinction kind of event, or we kill each other with nuclear weapons or a virus outbreak first. Yes, okay, fine, barring those caveats, the achievement of a truly free society is the inevitable destiny of our species. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to be on the right side of history, the side of peace and progress and love, or you want to be on the side of fear and holding us back. And I know the answer for me. I know the answer for you, Ricky, so I'm really honored. Thank you so much. And I guess, I got to end. Final shameless plug, because Ricky's on top of things. Somewhere there's a link for thefreedomline.com. You can get my book there for free. You can find the presidential website, kokeshfornotpresident.com, from there as well. Find my YouTube channel and all my other social media presences there. Again, finally, Ricky, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who's still watching, listening at this point, and participating in this beautiful march forward. Excuse me, dance forward for humanity.
Well, you don't want to dance in the wrong places because you get arrested for that too. But thanks again, Adam. I really appreciate your time. It's you've done such amazing work. I've been a fan of yours since I heard you on the Rogan podcast. Probably, I don't even know how many years ago. But it's been quite a bit. You got to go back on there again, and hopefully soon. And I'm sure, and Rogan, he's one of those guys, again, he leans libertarian, and I think a lot of his views, he doesn't like titles, but he definitely, a lot of his views lean that way. But thanks a lot, Adam. I really appreciate your time. Keep up the amazing work, and hopefully for no other reason, maybe I'll try to get you. I mean, I know Hunter's down. If you're down, then we'll get you guys together. Not for any. Again, not to try to get hits or anything like that, but more because I think it would be a great discussion with two people that are much smarter than me, and because I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think it'd be a useful conversation for people who are listening. I think people would get a lot out of it. I think when you can have two people who maybe disagree but are very respectful and willing to kind of share ideas, I think I love hearing, I'm sure even with yourself, I love hearing two people debate something, because usually people will say something that I've never thought of, and kind of force somebody to really reanalyze where they stand, and maybe and I'm sure with all the debates you've gone in, and I've gone in, and you know, a handful of some intense debates, it makes me re-examine sometimes my own views. Like, you know what, I didn't have an answer for that, and why is that? Is it because I'm wrong, or is it because I haven't really thought about it, or whatnot? So I think sometimes debate, as long as it's for the purpose of sharing ideas, is a healthy and useful thing. So you know, I'll try to make it happen, and we'll get together and talk. Hunter's a great guy, and obviously, you know, you're a great guy, so I think it'll be a fun conversation. It'll be a fun and entertaining conversation. So, and if nobody else gets anything out of it, I'm sure I will. So, but
awesome. Thanks so much, brother.
Hey, thanks, Adam. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Peace and love.
Peace.
Believe in the ripple effect.